Pleasant day, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the subject GE6, or primarily known as ethics. And today, we are going to discuss one of the major topics in midterm. Hi, I'm Miss Wendhilyn Camposo, and I am your reporter for this topic. I wish you guys will listen very carefully for you to understand my discussion. Are you guys ready? Okay, let's begin examining the idea. What do you think is deontology? Did you hear the word before? Or today was your very first time to hear such term? Okay, so deontology is a moral theory that evaluates actions that are done because of duty. Deontology comes from the Greek word deon, which means being necessary. Hence, it refers to the study of duty and obligations. From the provided definition itself, what is deontology in its simplest form? So, according to its definition, deontology is a moral theory that evaluates. What do you mean evaluate? To evaluate meaning it is used to assess actions done because of duty and obligations. Furthermore, the main proponent of deontology is Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant was a German Enlightenment philosopher who wrote one of the most important works on moral philosophy. He developed a revolutionary insights concerning the human minds and the condition for the possibility of knowledge. Kant's most important work in the moral philosophy was named Groundwork towards Metaphysics of Humans. What does this primary text about? So, the Groundwork towards Metaphysics of Humans is a text that shows the contribution of Kant in moral philosophy. By itself, the text is also revolutionary, insofar as Kant's ambition in the text is radical. He intends to develop what he calls supreme principle of morality. It is supreme because by basing it on the faculty of reason, it becomes binding for all creatures that have that faculty. Faculty here means inherent mental capacity. This way, the binding force of obligation is no longer relative but universal. It no longer depends on what a person's historical, cultural, and religious circumstances are, for as long as that person has the faculty of reason. The moral law is binding. Binding means cannot be broken or fixed, holding together. In this work, Kant brings our attention to the fact that we human beings have the faculty called the rational will. Rational will is the capacity to act according to principles that we determine for ourselves. Furthermore, in considering the rational will, we have to point out the difference between animals and persons. For the animals are sentient organisms. When we say sentient, it is an organism that has the ability to perceive and navigate its external environment. Like for example, the dogs and carabaos are sentient organisms. We do not see them bumping into trees and walls unless their senses are weak. In addition, animals constantly interact with their surroundings. On the other end of the spectrum are the humans. Similar to animals, humans are also sentient because we also interact with the world, reacting to external stimuli and internal impulses to survive and thrive. On the other hand, people are also rational. Rationality consists of the mental faculty to construct ideas and thoughts that are beyond our immediate surroundings. Thus, we have the ability to stop and think about what we are doing. We can remove ourselves mentally from the immediacy of our surroundings and reflect on our actions affect the world. We can imagine a different and better world and create mental images of how we interact with people in that world. Like for example, A teacher first constructs her plans and ideas of an instructional material in her head. When the plans and ideas of the material was made, she can then give her discussion towards her students, which becomes the second construction. The first construction consists in how we imagine things can be. Then, implement that in the second construction. Moreover, through the capacity for imagination and reflection, we conceive of how we could affect, possibly even change, the world we lived in. Thus, we do not only have the capacity to imagine and construct mental images, but we also have the ability to enact and make real those mental images. This ability to enact our thoughts is the basis for the rational will. Therefore, rational will refers to the faculty to intervene in the world, to act in a manner that is consistent with our reasons. For instance, the animals, they are with immediacy with nothing that intervene between the impulse and the actions. They do not and cannot intend on their actions. So, we may say that animals do not act and they only react to their external surroundings and internal impulses, which is in contrast with us humans, because we have reason which intervene between impulse and act. We have the ability to stop and think about what are we doing to evaluate our actions according to principles. In short, we are not only reacting to our surroundings and internal impulses, but are also conceiving our ways to act according to certain rational principles. Take this for example. You didn't have enough sleep last night because you attend a party. You may feel sluggish. The corresponding impulses is to close your eyes and then fall asleep. Meanwhile, your rational will demands something else, which is to finish reading the entire chapter for the exam later. That exam is a big part of the big picture, so you can struggle to stay awake. You stand up and stretch your legs, or may have taken snacks or cold drinks. And this capacity is called agency, which is the ability of a person to act based on her intentions and mental states. So there are two principles of deontology, and the first one is autonomy. Kant claims that the property of rational will is autonomy, which is the opposite of heteronomy. These three Greek words, which are the autos, heteros, and nomos, are instructive, which means self, other, and law. Hence, when we combine autos and nomos, we get autonomy, while heteros and nomos, we get heteronomy. Autonomy means self-law or self-legislation, and heteronomy means other law. Consider the trivial example of washing hands before eating, which is not yet a moral dilemma, but is sufficient to explain the difference between autonomy and heteronomy. When you were a child, did you like to wash your hand before eating? As far as we can tell, children do not like to wash their hands, but parents know that their children should maintain proper hygiene. So, parents try to find ways to get their small children to wash their hands before eating, using a variety of incentives or threats of undesirable consequences. As we commonly hear our parents say, "Hey Mirna, go wash your hands before eating, or else you'll be eating the germs together with your food. Yuck!" Or, "Come on Mirna, if you wash your hands before eating, I will buy you new shoes." In this case of Mirna, are they autonomous? Certainly not, as her parents are the ones that legislate the principle that children should wash their hands before eating and impose such a principle by using threats or incentives. Now, think about Myrna 10 years later, where she in her teens. Suppose she washed her hands first every time she wants to eat something, and she do so without the prodding of her parents. At a certain point, perhaps when she was growing up as a teenager, she has reflected on the whole business of washing hands. She concluded that they first agree with the principle behind it, and thus, secondly, every time she eat, she imposed to herself to wash her hands first. Number 1 refers to the act of legislations of a principle, while number 2 refers to the enacting of the principle. Now, are they autonomous? Yes, certainly. Which Kant describing that the will is thus not subject to the law, but it is also subject to the law in such a way that it gives the law to itself, and primarily just in this way that the will can be considered the author of the law under which it is subject. When we think of someone being subject to the law, we usually think of an imposing authority figure that uses his power to control the subject into complying with his will. Imagine a teacher who caught one of her students cheating on her exam by forcing the student to come to the principal's office to take the consequence. Therefore, the will is the authority figure giving the law to itself. Next, autonomy is described by Kant as the will that is subject to a principle or law. Remember Myrna and the principle of washing hands before eating. On one hand, Autonomy is a simple legislation and imposition of a law by an external authority. The parents are the authority figures, and the law is imposed externally by rewards or punishment. On the other hand, autonomy belongs to the growing up and already rational Myrna, who has adopted such a law about washing hands before eating. She regularly imposed such a law on herself out of the enactment of the will to follow the law. The distinguishing point here is the locus of authorship of the law. Therefore, it is important to remember that if the author of the law is external, the will is subjected to external authority, and that is heteronomous will. Meanwhile, if the author was the will itself imposing the law unto itself, then the will is autonomous. The choice that can be determined by pure reason is called free choice. That which, determinable only by inclination, would be animal choice. Human choice, in contrast, is a choice that may indeed be affected, but not determined by impulses, and therefore in itself not pure, but nevertheless be determined to actions from pure will. Practical examples are the jealousy from seeing your lover hanging out with someone else. Kant calls this set of actions that are caused by sensible impulses as animal choice, or arbitrium brutum. Sensible impulses are usually bodily and emotional. Bodily instincts and desires comprise a set of human compulsions for survival and the propagation of the species. Emotions and sentiments also make up what Kant considers sensible impulses. On the other hand, there is a choice that is determined by pure reason called free choice. The other principle is the principle of universality. It contains the distinction about kinds of moral theories, namely substantive and formal theory. A substantive theory immediately promulgates the specific actions that comprise that theory. It identifies the particular duties in a straightforward manner that the adherents of the theory must follow. The set of 10 commandments of the Judeo-Christian is an example of substantive moral theory. The specific laws are articulated mostly in the form of a straightforward moral command, such as honor your father and your mother, you shall not kill, you shall not steal, and many others. In contrast, theory does not supply the rules or commands straight away. It does not tell you what you may or may not do. Instead, it provides us the form or framework of a moral theory. To provide the form of a moral theory is to supply a procedure and the criteria for determining on one's own the rules and moral commands. For instance, in reading radio manual, we are given the instruction and how to play the radio. But we are not given the actual radio itself. So to be exact, a formal theory will not give a list of rules or commands, but rather give us a set of instructions on how to make a list of duties or moral commands. In the text that Kant wrote in 1785, it embodies a formal theory called the categorical imperative. There are 4 key elements in this formulation of the categorical imperative, namely the action, maxim, will, and universal law. Kant states that we must formulate an action as a maxim, which he defines as a subjective principle of action. A maxim consists of a rule that we live in our day-to-day lives, but it does not have the status or states of a law or a moral command that binds us to act in a certain way. Rather, it depicts the pattern of our behavior. In the formulation of the categorical imperative, Kant calls our attention to the kind of maxims that we live by. He claims that we ought to act according to the maxim by which we can at once will that it become a universal law. So what does it mean to will a maxim that can become a universal law? It means that the maxim must be universal, which is what it means to will that it becomes a universal law. This means nothing other than imagining a world in which the maxim or personal rule that I live by were adopted by everyone as their own maxim. So do you have any questions? Any clarification before I end the discussion? If there's none, then let's call it a day. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope you enjoy the discussion and you learned something. Thank you.